Hi everyone, my name is Ciara Molloy and I'm a PhD candidate in criminology in the Sutherland School of Law in UCD. Thanks so much to the Museum of Childhood Ireland for asking me to participate in this project for Culture Night. The museum does incredible work in inspiring critical reflections about the diverse and complex histories of childhood and youth. The history of youth is central to my own research, which examines youth subcultures in Ireland during the period 1945 to 1985. I analyse the diverse and often conflicting representations of young people from pop cultural, policy, and personalistic perspectives, with particular focus on three subcultures, namely the Teddy Boys, the Mods, and the Bugsy Malones. And just to give a bit of background on these subcultures, so the Teddy Boys, an image of which you can see on the left of your screens there, emerged in the 1950s, listened to rock and roll artists like Bill Haley and Eddie Cochran, and wore Edwardian clothing, namely long draped jackets, narrow drain-pipe trousers, colourful waistcoats, and thick crepe-soled shoes, known as brothel creepers. In 1950s Ireland, the Teddy Boys became associated with delinquency, with knife crime, and with violence. In contrast, the mod subculture emerged in the early 1960s and were associated with music venues known as beat clubs. The mod style consisted of Italian-inspired tailored suits, while Fred Perry polo shirts, fishtail parkas, bowling shoes, and Levi jeans provided a more casual look. Mod's preferred mode of transport, as you can see in the middle picture on your screen, were Italian scooters in the form of Vespas or Lambrettas. The subculture in the 60s became associated with drug taking and also with sexual immorality. For instance, the wearing of miniskirts by female mods in 1960s Ireland was very much a topic of controversy at the time. The Bugsy Malones were a delinquent subculture that emerged in Dublin's north inner city in the 1970s. It comprised young males aged between 11 and 15 years of age who were associated with criminal activities such as jumpovers, namely a theft from a bank or business, and also handbag snatching. The term Bugsy Malone actually came from a 1976 film directed by Alan Parker and starring Jodie Foster, John Cassisi, and Scott Baio. The term was adopted by an Evening Herald journalist and applied in an Irish context. And in this video, there's two issues that I want to briefly address. First, why we should study the history of youth, and second, what insights for the present can we learn from a history of youth? So why study the history of youth? As I mentioned, criminology is my field of study, and there are a number of rationales for studying the concept of youth from a criminological perspective. First, there's a powerful symbolism associated with youth. To quote Bill Osgerby, young people serve as an ideological vehicle where wider social change is navigated. Because of this, they act as focal points of societal hopes, fears, and anxieties. This symbolism means that youth often tends to attract both censure and legal sanctions, which renders it an important focus of criminological attention. Second, the unsupervised leisure activities of youth have frequently led to moral panics, whether this relates to penny dreadfuls in the 1860s, horror comic books in the 1940s and 50s, or violent computer games in the 1990s. A moral panic is a disproportionate reaction to a perceived social crisis, often characterized by sensationalist media coverage, high levels of social anxiety, and a tough law and order response. The subjects of such societal criticism are known as folk devils, who are seen as threatening the very fabric of society and represent the personification of evil. As a third reason for studying youth, the boundaries between culture and crime are permeable, and youth subcultures, which are often stylistically distinctive, serve as vivid case studies which help to demonstrate this overlap. Finally, though not exhaustively, the age crime curve within desistance studies demonstrates that crime rates tend to increase during adolescence, usually peaks between the ages of 15 to 19, and then decreases during adulthood. This curve suggests that there's something about youth as a life stage which lends itself to crime and delinquency, which is one of the many reasons why youth has often been a focus of study by criminologists. Having established the rationales for the study of youth, it's worth considering what insights for the present can we learn from the history of youth. There's two insights in particular from my own research that I'd like to briefly outline. First, one of the things that emerged from comparing and contrasting the societal reactions to youth subcultures was that there was a failure of imagination surrounding proposed and actual measures of social control in relation to the Teddy Boys, the Mods, and the Bugsy Malones. Even though these subcultures manifested in different decades, the main solutions offered took three forms: the control of youth spaces, such as the banning of anyone in Edwardian dress from ballrooms; corporal punishment, such as calls for the birch to be reintroduced in response to the Mods; or confinement, such as the opening of a prison called Lock-in House in response to the Bugsy Malones in the late 1970s. A similar failure of imagination was noted by Geoffrey Pearson in relation to his research on street crime in Britain, and he claimed this failure was the product of a historical amnesia, whereby current problems are seen as unprecedented and the futility of earlier responses to moral panics are ignored. This recurrent perception of youth deviance as an unprecedented threat stems from a tendency towards golden age thinking, which sees youth then as the best of times and youth now as the worst of times. As a result of this apparent forgetfulness, adults lose a valuable sense of perspective on contemporary manifestations of youth deviance. If we can recapture this sense of perspective, which we can by adopting a historical approach, we can defuse the moral panics that often threaten to emerge surrounding youth subcultures. The second insight concerns the theme of aging and subcultural participation. In many ways, the term youth subculture is a bit of a misnomer. While an individual often initially becomes a member of a subculture during their youth, subcultural identity can be long-lasting and often persists into adulthood. Most of the Teddy Boys and Mods that I interviewed for my research were aged in their 50s. And in particular, I interviewed one Teddy girl who was in her 80s and still attended rock and roll events in Dublin and Belfast. Members of the Mod subculture still gather regularly at events such as Bubbles Mod Night, which is held usually 3 times a year in the Grand Central Hotel on Dublin's O'Connell Street. I had the pleasure of attending a Bubbles Mod Night recently, and I was blown away by the incredible music and rhythm, the sheer attention to detail of the mod style, the friendliness and the camaraderie of the subculture, and the genuine passion for the subculture, which many mods have held right from their teenage years to the present day. This emphasizes the need to adopt a more wide-ranging definition of youth that encapsulates the young at heart. While youth is often interpreted as a particular stage in the life course, it can also be regarded as a state of mind which is performed by individuals regardless of chronological age. This extended definition of youth facilitates analysis not only of the lives of young people in the post-1945 era, but also the current lived experiences of aging subcultural participants who still identify with supposed youth subcultures such as the Teddy Boys, the Mods, and the Bugsy Malones. And I think I'll wrap it up there. Thanks so much again to the Museum of Childhood Ireland for organising this video project and for facilitating a rich discussion of why the history of childhood and youth matters. I'm wishing you all a wonderful Culture Night 2022.